We did it. Somehow, we got all the way to the patch without a leak. And honestly, thank goodness. Hela has been addressed, sort of, by making her a 6/7 that now has the resurrections at -3. And the devs have straight up said, she's not a good card, but it's oppressive to go up against regularly. And that's pretty much exactly how I feel about it too. I hate that 20% of my matches are going up well, just roll the dice on turn 6 and see where everything lands, because I spent 5 turns just tossing all of my big stuff and I can just let it sprinkle however I want and most likely I'll win anyway. It's not a fun deck to go up against. I've gone on rants and you can listen to them over on Twitch if you want, but this basically does a couple of things. Number one, it mandates that Luke Cage be in your decks for Hela. You absolutely have to have Luke Cage at this point. It's too oppressive at -3 to not have it. I also see this in substitution, then maybe changing how we build those decks, maybe not running Lady Sif to be played on turn 3 every time. You're aiming to drop Luke Cage on turn 3. And if you see that, now that's kind of your little trigger marker to know, hey, most likely we're gonna get a Hell Cow on 4, Lady Sif and Colleen Wing on 5, activate the Hell Cow, and then there's your Hela on 6. And that's still a lot of cards that need to come back and they have to not have that -3 power. So it's this weird balance where they, yeah, sure, they gave her an extra power at 6/7, which I honestly don't think they needed to even do. But their argument is that she's a mediocre deck and we just want to back off her play rate. And I'm happy that that's what they want to do. I just don't think that this is the change that will decrease the play rate. I think it will long term. In the short term, people are going to back off it because they just don't want to do it, or they don't have Luke Cage and they were getting away with it beforehand. Now I feel like it's going to back off for a little while, and then in a couple weeks, it's going to start to come back again. So let's enjoy this time as Hela backs away. And if you were a Hela player, there are a lot of other decks out there. It's a lot harder to pull off your combos in the really good way now. Please, can we not play Hela anymore? I mean, look what they did. Now, in an unexpected turn of events, they took a power off of Marvel Boy. They brought him down from 3/2 to 3/1. And this also, to me, shows how in tune they are with what goes on in all of Marvel Snap, because Marvel Boy has kind of flown under the radar as being an incredibly good card. Squirrel Girl or any other combos of 1s plus Marvel Boy, every single turn, here's a little sprinkle of power, sprinkle of power. This is way more than a 3/2, as previously was, is way more than a 3/2. More often than not, this is like a 3/8, 3/11, etc. It makes total sense to drop this down by 1 power. But I think more importantly, as a counter to this deck, this is a big thing because now it can't hide behind a squirrel. Now, if you're going to get Red Guardianed because they see a Squirrel Girl come on down on turn 1 or turn 2, you know that Marvel Boy is going to come on out. You can't hide behind it like you used to because the squirrel would be hit and Marvel Boy sitting at 2 power, you couldn't Red Guardian it. Now at 3/1, you absolutely can Red Guardian it and undo its ability and makes it a lot more of a counterplay to that archetype, because Gilgamesh wins a lane all by itself and Marvel Boy kind of sprinkles all of that power progressively in another lane over time. Now at a 3/1, it makes it a lot harder to win one of those 2 lanes. And I think that this is just a good demonstration that they're aware that we make changes to some of these other decks and most likely other decks will also rise. I think when Hela disappears, it was very plausible that we could see a decrease in Clog, which means an increase in Zoo. And they're kind of getting ahead of it by doing this exact change. This isn't going to do anything. Tell you that right now. War Machine went from a 4/7 to a 4/6. And I don't see this doing anything whatsoever to the combination of Storm, War Machine, Legion. They gotta address Legion because being able to play those 2 cards back to back is what causes such problems with the Lockout deck. It's like what old Galactus used to be, where you just knew. You knew the combo was coming, You were ahead, you ramped out the Galactus, and you retreated for 2 cubes. That's what this is doing too. And if it's consistently easy to pull off that combination, this is just as damaging of an archetype as Hela was, where it's just not fun to play against. And I think getting ahead of that combination is what they're trying to do here by dropping a power off of War Machine. But if you could still play Legion into that Storm lane, I really don't think it's going to matter, because guess what? You're still pulling off the combo, and even though War Machine might have 1 less power, it's really easy to Doctor Doom, Ultron, Infinite, you know, get that big power on turn 6 to compensate for the 1 loss of power that comes off of War Machine. This is them, to me, I'm reading this as they get it. They know that this is probably going to be a problem. Let's try to address it. I just don't think they did. Now for the good news. Now the good news comes. Cards like Symbiote Spider-Man are getting buffed. So we're adding a power to Symbiote Spider-Man now as a 4/7. And thank God they did this week, okay? How bad would it have felt if they had done it in the next OTA after the season was over and you couldn't get the card because you had to wait for it to be a Series 5 drop for tokens for you? Like, it just, ugh. Thank you. Thank you for making this change now. Give the community here in the last week of Q3, the last opportunity to get this card for the month. And I'm still going to say the season pass is always one of the best values in the game. I always recommend getting it for the card or not. But now you have more reason to, because 4/7 with this card is a lot more attractive. If you think of the synergies that work well with it right now, you think of Black Panther, you think of Galactus, you think of, if you get the double proc with Negasonic Teenage Warhead, you think of all of these other cards that make these double pieces, double Sage proc-offs, double White Widow proc-offs, right? There's so many things you can do with this card. The problem has been that it's just very pigeonholed to only a turn 4 or turn 5 play to make it work. And as 4/6 stats, it never feels good to play as a stats card later on if you can't get it to be an activate card. What we learned from Wiccan on the other end of it is that 4/7 is very good. If you don't get it to do its thing though, you want it to be good stats. That's exactly what's happening here. Now at 4/7, you can play this on turn 6 as just good stats alongside a Shadow King and a White Widow or something along those lines, right? This is a very good card now, and I think it's worth having in your collection. It's one of the more fun cards to play into the game. Highly recommend getting this at 4/7 now. This is a really, really fun card. Hey, speaking of Galactus, they straight up made him more powerful too, which means that this combination of Symbiote Spider-Man on 4 into Galactus on 6, this just got a double buff. So now that lane, instead of being 11 power to win the lane, is now 13 power to win the lane. And that's not something small. That's something to keep an eye on because it could be potentially dangerous. Now, what they said in their description was that they've added a lot more 3/5 cards, foreshadowing, to the game. And that's honestly pretty good. That power creep I'm totally about. For 3-cost cards, 5 is a very good power stat line. And Galactus couldn't even take over a copycat. That's a problem, and they recognize that too. So now they've given Galactus an extra piece of power. I expect people to be playing a lot of Galactus this week because they're gonna get Symbiote Spider-Man out, they're gonna get their Galactuses out, they're gonna get their awesome combo cards, the double split often happen. You're gonna see a lot of Doctor Dooms even because of that. I expect a rise in Galactus, and I know Interrobang is smiling somewhere out there in the Marvel Snap community right now as we speak. He's been wanting a buff for this forever, so this one's for you, man, 100%. Now for the best buff, at least in my opinion, of the entire patch. Update notes, you know what I meant, all right? Negasonic Teenage Warhead. This is a very good card, okay? A lot of people like this card, but a lot of people don't like to play it because it's a 3/2. And it can be a lane winner all by itself regularly, right? You think of Juggernaut, and that's probably the best way I could compare the power of Negasonic Teenage Warhead. It can be a lane winner because it's like a mini Eliath kind of sorta, in a way. And it's now going to be able to fit even better into Cerebro 3 and even better into your Surfer deck and even better into your Lockdown deck because it's got an extra piece of power. This is one of the scarier cards in Marvel Snap. and it always catches people by surprise. I think that's going to be a lot less surprising because I think a lot more people are going to play this card now, especially at a 3/3 stat line. It's always been a card that people want to be good, but they've always been hesitant to making it good. And now at 3/3, I think this is officially justified as saying it is now a good card. So what Second Dinner could have done, keyword, could have done, is just made Symbiote Spider-Man a 4/8. So that way, all of these other combinations in the last 3 cards we talked about, Galactus, Negasonic Teenage Warhead, and now Black Panther, their effects would be fantastic with that extra power. But instead, they put 1 to the Symbiote Spider-Man, and 1 to Black Panther, and 1 to Negasonic, and you get a point, you get a point, you get a point. You know the Oprah reference. Black Panther at 5/5 is a scarier card, much scarier card, because remember, 5/5 is not 5/5 with Black Panther. This is 5/10. This is not even trying 5/10. This is baseline 5/10. That's really good. Abomination's 5/9. This is 5/10. And sure, you're always trying to get this card to proc off differently. But now it makes you almost want to play certain play lines a little different. You may really reconsider the combination of Okoye into the deck and putting in Nakia into the deck as well. Aranya into the deck to get some 5/12s really easy. Like, there's some cool things you can do with this card with 1 extra point of power. So knowing that we got the change to Symbiote Spider-Man, I also expect to see a lot more Black Panther combo decks coming on out because they just go way higher than that Scarlet thing that happened to come out this week. The Angela of Move, also known as Kraven, has also received a point of power. And I think that this is in response to seeing how when Madam Web came out, it was very much so a card where a lot of us said, oh, throw in Kingpin, throw in Kraven, throw in Hercules, throw in all these other like move elements. Let's make an awesome move card. And then when it's time to cut them because you're doing combos, what's the number 1 card you cut? And most people cut Kraven because to get its true value to be worthwhile at 2 cost, you want to get it to at least 2/5, and getting it to 2/4 never felt good. So you'd have to get 2 moves onto it, which doesn't always happen. So now being at a 2/3, even if 1 card moves onto it, that feels really good. I also think that this is looking at the data mines. If everything rolls out the way it's supposed to roll out, this could very much so be in preparation for the October season, getting the Kraven piece to have an extra +2. I think that this is a good change. I could not have forecasted this change either, but again, this is the devs having awareness that they want Move to be good, not too good, but they want it to be better. And they put out so many cards to help that. And it didn't do it. It was just, it got so close. Aranya definitely did. In that package with like Dagger and Vulture and Madam, definitely did. Kraven always got cut. Now you may have to reconsider that, because after Kraven got cut, the next card that you chose to cut was probably Hercules, because it's too many people doing too many move things. And I don't know if we needed this buff, because the reason people were cutting out Hercules was because there's a lot of move mirrors, and getting the priority so that way you can capitalize on the Hercules move out first before your opponent. That's basically how we ended up trying to balance out Hercules and justify him being in the deck is, well, do I have priority and will I be able to take advantage of the move, or am I helping my opponent? And because so many people were playing move cards, you very often were helping your opponent, so you cut Hercules. Now at 3/5, and the decrease in move generally that we are projected to see, even though I disagree with that, which I'll get to in a minute, I think that 3/5 Hercules is now a very good move staple. You want Hercules in your move decks. You want it to proc off once or twice, and then you've gotten its value because you got an extra hit off of your Vulture, an extra hit off of your Human Torch, etc., etc., etc. Even Nocturne for a double location change. Don't sleep on the power of that. Think of what Legion does for the game. Imagine what that can also do for the game. So I'm excited to see 3/5 Hercules finally be something that makes us say, I want to play Hercules, because he went from being the worst card in Series 3 to now being probably a mandatory card in the move packages because he's good stats and not as many people will be playing move. When you look at the entire scope of the meta of what's going to happen because of all of these changes, the biggest one obviously is going to be Hela. In turn, the decrease in Hela will probably lead to a decrease in Clog, mentally first, which will then lead to an increase in move, which will then lead to an increase in, well, Clog again. So Clog is still a very good deck right now. Move is probably going to be competing for that spot, but I expect to start seeing some hybrid ways to handle the move and Clog combinations. I wouldn't be surprised if we started seeing move Clog become the hybrid deck, become the best deck in the game. They tried to get ahead of Zoo being the best deck in the game by taking down a point off of Marvel Boy because it very well could overdo it. But Dagger is just an incredibly strong card right now. Vulture is getting so many movements. If you got the move cards, that should be the direction you'd go post this OTA, because the, set it and forget it of Hela is basically too risky at this point. And please, we're just trying to get people to stop playing Hela, just in general as a community here. So this is my plea to you doing that as well. I think that this is a good OTA. I am happy to see it. I don't understand a couple of them, like War Machine, but I do think that this is going to change the landscape of Marvel Snap generally for the better. And I hope you feel that way too. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought. Are you excited for this patch? Because honestly, it is good.